All right, Shabbosai, good afternoon, good night of Shabbos. I just wanted to finish up just a little bit more to the daf today, to Meretz Hashem put us on the right track for tomorrow. So if you remember again in the Mishnah, we spoke about the idea that if I sell a field to Reuven, and I give, or let's say differently, I sell a field to Reuven gives me a down payment. So that at this point in time, who is able to consume the payros? So this is the fundamental machlokas we are dealing with. In other words, in the interim, between the time of the down payment and the time that the sale is finalized, who gets to consume the produce? So if you remember again, this was a machlokas. Rav Huna says, mocher, it is the seller who consumes the produce. And Rav Safra, and Rav Anan said essentially we put the peiros in escrow. We kind of wait just to see what exactly is going to unfold over here. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says it's not really a machlokes. The Gemara answered it's not a machlokes. Rather, it's referring to two different cases. One is talking about a case, Rav Huna, when he says it's the seller who eats the peiros, he's talking about a case where I say to Reuven, listen, thank you for the down payment. The sale will be finalized and the field will become yours at the time that you go ahead and you give me complete payment. So when that occurs, it's yours. Meaning, and up until that point in time, it belongs to me, the seller. So because it belongs to me, the seller, therefore, I get to eat the peiros. Rav Anan, on the other hand, the Gemara says, is referring to a case where I say, okay, you gave me the down payment now, and then at the point when you go ahead and you give me the rest of the money, retroactively, it will become your field to the moment, retroactively chal to the moment you gave me the down payments. Now the problem just is, so again, who is considered to be the owner of the field? So on one hand, if I go ahead and if I, the owner, consume the peiros in the interim and Reuven doesn't buy the field, then it's a potential issue ultimately again of ribbis and vice versa. So therefore again, that would be the situation where halacha l'maisa, we would put the peiros in escrow. So the Gemara says, Tani Rav Safra, but ribbis de Rabbi Chia. So Rav Safra, when he was teaching the sugya of ribbis in the yeshiva of Rabbi Chia, he said as follows. He says, Pamim sheshnei mutarin. There are times where both the seller and the purchaser are permitted to eat the produce. Pamim sheshnei masurin. There are times when both of them are prohibited to go ahead and consume the produce. Upamim shamocher muter velokeach aser. And there are times where the seller is permitted, but the purchaser is prohibited. Upamim shalokeach muter umocher aser. And then there are other times where the purchaser is permitted and the seller is prohibited. So 4 different cases. So Ani Rava Basrei. So now Rava explained Rav Safra's rulings. Let's go through all of these cases. Case number 1. Pamim sheshnei mutarin. So what's the situation where both the buyer and the seller are permitted to take part of the produce? The Amarle Kani Kishir Zuzach. So this is actually a pretty easy and straightforward case. I'm selling a field to Reuven. Reuven gives me a down payment. I say, great, Reuven. So let's say I'm selling him a field for $10,000, and Reuven gives me a down payment of $1,000. I say, great, you've now acquired 1/10 of the field. So because Reuven has acquired 1/10 of the field, he gets to eat 1/10 of the produce, and I get 9/10 of the produce. So that's a case where both of us have the ability to consume the produce. That's case 1. Case 2, Pamim Sheshein Asurin. So what's the case ultimately again where both will be prohibited? In other words, neither the seller nor the buyer. That's the Amarle L'chimaisis Kani Me'achshav. That's the case we've been talking about up until now, where I'm selling to Reuven. Reuven gives me a down payment, and I say, Reuven, when you give me the rest of the money, ultimately the field will become yours retroactively. So neither I nor Reuven can partake of the produce. Now I will say, now take a quick look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, it's actually, go back to Rashi, in the Mishnah. It's 3 lines up on the top, Aser. Rashi says, Lasos kin v'davka da amar le'lechi maisis mos ramos kaname achshav lefichach. Now, Rashi just walks through this. I didn't get a chance to do this in Shir, so let's take a look at it now. Rashi says, explains this case. Lefichach, Aser lasos kin. Shim yochal mocho peres v'sochas. So let's play this out. I sell the field to Reuven, and it's $10,000. Reuven gives me $1,000. I say, Reuven, when you pay me the rest of the money, the field will become retroactively yours to this point. So now, who gets to eat the produce? So Rav Safra posits that neither the seller nor the buyer gets to eat the produce. This is the case of the Mishnah. What's the problem over here? So look at Rashi. Rashi says like this. Here's the problem. Shim yochal mocher. Let's say I, the seller, consume the produce while the rest of the payment is still outstanding. Besochach l'cheshiyavi zehamos nimsa shasad kinula me'ayom so hamecher v'zeh achal peros b'schar hamtanas ma'osav. So here's the problem. If Reuven pays up the rest of the purchase price, so then it turns out that the field is retroactively Reuven's from the time that he gave me the down payment. Now, if I, the seller, have been consuming the produce this entire time, that means I'm getting both the payment and the produce. That's ribbis. So that's if Reuven makes good on the sale. So therefore, again, I the seller can't eat the produce in the event that Ruvain consummates the sale, finishes the sale retroactively. It's his. If I'm eating produce that whole time, then I'm in violation of ribis. On the other hand, so let's say, okay, so let Ruvain eat the produce. Shema lo yavi mos ramos. Maybe Ruvain will not consummate the sale. He won't finish the sale. And what's going to happen? I'm going to give him back his money. V'yachzor lo zeh ma shekibel. V'nimtza shlo haisa sadikinu lo dahal l'chi maisis kanei me'achshav amarle. V'halo aisiu mos harishonos kimil v'ba'al mahavu. Eitzel mocher zeh v'zeh achal peres b'scharo. So then if Ruvain doesn't finish the sale, then I'm going to return his money. And if he's been consuming the produce this entire time, remember, then the money that he deposited with me effectively becomes a loan. So I'm returning him his money. Plus, he's consumed the produce, so it's ribis. So therefore, I will say, in that case where you have a down payment and a retroactivity clause, neither party, Rav Safra says, the Mishnah says, neither party is permitted to consume the peiros. Okay, that's our case. That's case number 2. Case number 3. Pamim mocher muter v'lokeach aser. There are times where the seller is permitted to consume the produce and the purchaser is not. What's that case? Da'amarle l'chi maisis kani. That's a case where I say, I'm selling the field to Ruvain and say, Ruvain, thank you for the down payment. When you bring me the rest of the money, it's the field is yours. But up until that point in time, I'm retaining ownership. So because I'm the owner, therefore I am permitted to go ahead and consume the produce. Good. Case 3. Case 4. Pamim shalokeach muter umocher aser. There are times where the purchaser is permitted to eat the produce, but the seller is not. What's that case? Da'amarle kane me'achshav v'zuzoi lehavu halva'a gabach. Interesting case. That's where I say to Ruvain. Right? I say to Ruvain, here is, Ruvain gives you the down payment. The field is yours as of now, and the rest of the purchase price is a loan upon you. In that case, the purchaser is permitted to go ahead and eat the produce, but the mocher would not be able, because if the seller were to eat it, then the consumption of the produce would constitute ribis. Beautiful. So mantana shnei masurin. So who is the one who says in the case, right? In the case of where we have the retroactivity clause, whose opinion is reflected in this idea that neither the seller nor the buyer could consume the produce? Rav Huna Rav Yoshua Delo Krevi Huda. I can tell you who it's not. So I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Rabbi Yehuda. Why did Rabbi Yehuda? Of course, we had this before. Ha'amar tzad echad beribis mutter. Remember again, Rabbi Yehuda holds that in order for a transaction to be prohibited as a ribis transaction, what has to happen? It has to definitively result in ribis. If you have a transaction that may result in ribis, but may not result in ribis, then ultimately Rabbi Yehuda says that's called sad echa beribis. There's one scenario that could create a ribis situation, and therefore halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yehuda holds that is not a ribis transaction. So again, Rabbi Yehuda's idea is that in order for a transaction to be problematic als ribis, it must definitively result in ribis. If you remember again, in the case of the retroactivity clause, we're just concerned about a possibility of the transaction resulting in ribis, but it's not definitive. It's not definitive. So the Gemara is just pointing out, I'm not telling you who the case is reflecting of or whose opinion it reflects, but I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that only a contingency possibility of ribis does not create a ribis-laden transaction and would not be problematic. All right, we'll stop over for today. So again, obviously we're going to expound more on these cases, but the major takeaway from this is this interesting case where you're receiving a down payment. So now, again, if I'm receiving a down payment, and now the which means the purchaser has to obviously pay me the rest of the money. So what happens with produce in between the time of the down payment and the time of the furnishing of the rest of the purchase price? So what the Gemara seems to suggest over here is that halacha l'maisa, especially where there is, so again, 2 cases are pretty much clear. In a case where Ruvain gives me a down payment, and I say, okay, the field will become yours when you give me the rest of the money. That means the field is mine until Ruvain fully pays up. If that's the case, I'm absolutely permitted, the seller, I'm permitted to consume produce that entire time. That's not a shaila. The shaila is in the retroactivity case. So again, Ruvain gives me a down payment, and I say to Ruvain, the field will be yours retroactively to right now, to today, when you pay me the money. So now the shaila is 2 scenarios. Ruvain buys the field. If Ruvain buys the field, then halacha l'maaseh, if I, the seller, am consuming the produce, then I'm getting ribis because I'll get the purchase price, right? And then retroactively it'll be triggered to the day of the initial down payment, and I've been consuming produce this entire time. If Ruvain defaults and Ruvain, the purchaser, has been consuming produce, then I return his money, that's the loan amount, and he's been consuming produce, that's the ribis amount. So therefore, it seems to be in that case, with the retroactivity clause, we don't allow anyone to consume produce. That's reflective of the majority opinion. Doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds whenever you only have the possibility of ribis, but not definitive ribis, Rabbi Yehuda holds it as not a ribis transaction. Rabbi Yehuda would hold this case as mutter, but we do not paskin that way. That way, paskin like the statement in the Mishnah. All right, the Mosai Shkoyach. Now we're up to date, and looking forward to Baruch Hashem to another week of learning together. It's been such a schus to learn this incredible back. Difficult, a lot to hold on to, but what a schus to all together. Good night of Shabbos, everyone, and Kol Tov.